Hi there. Today on This Day in History for September 9, we're going to go all the way back to 1087. On September 9, 1087, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy and King of England, dies in Rouen while conducting a war which began when the French king made fun of him for being fat. You have to be okay with who you are. You have to be self-confident and not let stuff like that get to you. In 1776, the Continental Congress formally declared the name of the new nation to be the United States of America. This replaced the term United Colonies, which had been in general use previously. A resolution by Richard Henry Lee, which had been presented to Congress on June 7 and approved July 2, 1776, issued the resolve that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. And so it is. In 1828, Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy, author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina, was born on this day in 1828. In 1850, California, in the midst of a gold rush, became the 31st state in record time. Though it had only been part of the United States for less than 2 years, California became the 31st state in the Union without ever having been a territory on September 9, 1850. Oh wow, in 1890, Colonel Harlan Sanders, originator of Kentucky Fried Chicken fast food restaurants, was born on this day in 1890. In 1893, President Cleveland's child is born in the White House. Frances Folsom Cleveland, the wife of President Grover Cleveland, gave birth to a daughter, Esther, in the White House. Esther was the first child of a president to be born in the White House, but not the first child ever to be born there, nor actually the first child of the Clevelands. In 1806, James Madison Randolph was born to Martha Randolph, the daughter of President Thomas Jefferson. In 1900, James Hilton, British novelist who authored Lost Horizon, Goodbye Mr. Chips, and created the imaginary world of Shangri-La, was born on this day in 1900. In 1910, Alice B. Toklas moved in permanently with Gertrude Stein. Alice B. Toklas became the lifetime housemate of avant-garde writer Gertrude Stein. Stein, who shared a house with her brother Leo for many years, met Toklas in 1907. Toklas began staying with Stein and Leo in Paris in 1909 and then moved in permanently in 1910. Stein's brother Leo moved out in 1914, because three's a crowd, I guess. Toklas' love and support of Stein was so important that when Stein wrote her autobiography in 1933, she titled it The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, adopting Toklas' persona as the narrator of her own memoirs. Stein is considered to be one of the most influential thinkers and writers of the century. She died in France in 1946. Her last words, according to Toklas, were, "What is the answer? In that case, what is the question?" In 1919, the infamous Boston police strike of 1919 began on this day, causing an uproar around the nation and confirming the growing influence of unions in American life. Using the situation to their advantage, criminals took the opportunity to loot the city. While the Boston police strike proved disastrous for unions in the short term, police were eventually allowed to form unions. However, it is illegal for police to go on strike, and even informal work actions such as blue flu, whereby large numbers of police officers call in sick at the same time, are seriously discouraged. 1926, the Radio Corporation of America, whose initials are RCA, have you ever heard of that? creates the National Broadcasting Company, whose initials are NBC. NBC. Have you ever heard of that? 1926. In 1939, audiences at the Fox Theater in Riverside, California got a surprise showing of Gone with the Wind, which the theater manager showed as a second feature. Producer David O. Selznick sat in the back and observed audience reaction to his highly anticipated film. The movie was released a few months later when Gone with the Wind debuted in Atlanta on December 15, 1939. I imagine we'll talk about that again in December. And became an instant hit, breaking all box office records. The film was nominated for more than a dozen Oscars and won 9. It won 9 of them, WON1, including Best Picture, Best Screenplay, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress, which, by the way, went to Hattie McDaniel, the first African-American actress to win the award. In 1941, Otis Redding, singer, songwriter, record producer, known as the King of Soul, famous for Sitting on the Dock of the Bay and Respect. Well, Otis was born on this day in 1941. 1942, the Japanese bombed the U.S. mainland. On this day in 1942, a Japanese float plane dropped incendiary bombs on an Oregon state forest, the first and only attack on the U.S. mainland in the war. In 1956, Elvis Presley made his first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. The Ed Sullivan Show was TV's reigning variety program, as any of you who are old enough to have seen it may remember. I'm barely old enough to remember it. Although in 1956 I was but a toddler, so I don't remember that exactly. Cameras focused on his upper torso to avoid showing his pelvis gyrations, which many Americans, including Ed Sullivan, thought unfit for a family show. My, how times have changed. And not for the better. With 60 million viewers, or 82.6% of TV viewers at the time, tuning in, the appearance garnered the show's best ratings in 2 years and became the most watched TV broadcast of the 1950s. That's impressive, actually. The Ed Sullivan Show was filmed in New York, but Presley performed remotely from CBS Los Angeles studio as he was filming his first movie, Love Me Tender, in California. At the time, his first album, Elvis Presley, had already debuted, and Heartbreak Hotel was a hit single, but he wasn't quite yet the king. There is a link to a portion of that appearance in the description, by the way. In 1965, Hurricane Betsy, the first hurricane to exceed $1 billion in damages, unadjusted, makes its second landfall near New Orleans. In 1967, Sergeant Dwayne D. Hackney is presented with the Air Force Cross for bravery in rescuing an Air Force pilot in Vietnam. He was the first living Air Force enlisted man to receive the award, the nation's second highest award for bravery in action. In 1969, Ho Chi Minh was buried in Hanoi. Funeral services, attended by 250,000 mourners, were held for Ho Chi Minh in Hanoi's Ba Dinh Square. In 1971, a riot broke out at the Attica prison in New York. Prisoners rioted and seized control of the maximum security Attica Correctional Facility near Buffalo, New York. Later that day, state police retook most of the prison, but 1,281 convicts occupied an exercise field called D Yard, where they held 39 prison guards and employees hostage for 4 days. Now, I'm just going to tell you that didn't end well, but we'll hear more about it in the days to come. Mao Zedong, who led the Chinese people through a long revolution and ruled the nation's communist government from its establishment in 1949, died on this date in 1976. In 1991, Tajikistan declared independence from USSR on this day. Alrighty, that's all the notes I've got for this day in history. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And feel free to share this video if you found it interesting. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Your adoring microphone. Oh, you're such a sweet little microphone. I love you too. All right, let's take that from the top again. Isn't this a cute cup? Our granddaughter Mira colored that picture and they had it made into art. No, that's not how it goes. Okay. All right, hold it right there, buddy. Okay, let's do that one again. Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy. Why can't I get that Tolstoy right? Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy. All right, let's see here. Sometimes somebody thinks I'm talking to her when I'm not.
That's something I don't know.
Okay, read the words. Mao Zedong, who led the Chinese people through a long revolution, and then you'd think if the people were going along with it, the revolution wouldn't have to be that long. Okay, we need to remember our modifiers. A revolution. Yeah, there was a revolution, all right. That's awkward. Okay, try it again.